thing here, right? Message server, ABAP dispatcher, and you have also seen all these other work processes as well. Very important point, right? So you have seen the message server, you have seen the ABAP dispatcher, and you have seen all the other work processes as well. To look at these work processes in SAP, and we'll come back to this transaction again, but briefly the transaction is SM50, which I'm going to execute right now. So this is where I see all the work processes. So these are the same numbers, same process IDs, PID, as we were seeing at the Unix level, right? So if I actually were to superimpose them, right, so 28100, 101, 102 right here, 28100, 101, 102. So this whole instance was started by the dispatcher, and dispatcher and message server was started by the actual start SAP command. That's one certification question. The next certification question which comes is, which one of this is the NQ work process? And there is no way you can figure it out just by looking at the OS level. Unless you look at here, right? 28121 is the only way you'll figure out that this guy, 28121, is the NQ work process. Because by looking at this at the OS level, you won't be able to determine that.
Right. So there is no way we can get this information at all. So only we have to log into the SAP.
Right. There is one way, which is you have to go to the log files, right? Because at the end of the day, log files are written, and when those log files are written, the log file tells that this is the log file for the NQ, and one of the first things in the log file is the process ID, which it started with. And since the question was asked, and not to confuse people, if I were to go to this process here, and I were to look at its log file, which is this little icon here, display file, right? This log file is situated at the OS level. So truly speaking, if I went through all the log files at the OS level and I VI'd them and I looked at this PID, right? So once I open the log file, right, and I find the log file which I'm looking for, which says that this is the NQ work process, and then I look at the PID in there, then I will be able to basically, but that's, you're basically opening up every file, right? So it's not technically the answer is that yes, there is a way to find it out, but too cumbersome, right? So typically what you do is you come to SM50 to find it out. Right? Otherwise, you will have to open up, right? Open up the otherwise you'll have to open up the file, go to the file which says that this is the NQ file right here showing NQ information, then go to the top of the file, find out its respective PID, which is saying 28121, right? But not the best way to do it. Again, we'll come back to it, right? Right now I just wanted to show you what are the different work processes which are out there. Any questions, people who are remote? So far what we talked about in terms of how to correlate each of the entities in this diagram, message server, dispatcher, work processes, to what we see at the back end. right? Similarly, ICM, which stands for what? Internet Communication Manager, even that is running as a work process, and we should be able to look at that as well. It runs as ICMAN, Internet Communication Manager, and you see it right here. Who started this guy? Same 28088, right? So it was also started by 28088.
Basically, there are only two main processes. One is your message server, and one is your dispatcher, right?
No. Well, means all the other.
I mean, main key processes. Later, I mean, you know, like DB,
Yeah.
I mean, whatever that.
Yeah, they're all started by dispatcher.
Dispatcher.
Right. Correct. Yes. So that means if your dispatcher goes down, you have major issues, right? But you have got major issues only on that instance, because every instance has a dispatcher. But if you're on the central instance and your message server goes down, you're cooked, because then all of your instances are down as well. Because message server is a single point of failure for the whole system, not just for the instance.
What is the minimum requirement for message server to run? I mean, what is the minimum number? I mean, we can have
Only one.
Only one per system, per instance, right?
Per system.
Per system.
Yeah. So message, when we make the system, when we make the statement that it's a single point of failure, it means that there is only one running, right? And if that goes down, your whole system is unavailable. So what you do to make it highly available is you put it on a clustered node, right? So whether you have, HACMP, if you're doing AIX clustering, whether you have a, Microsoft cluster, if you're running it on Windows, you want to make that message server running on a node which is highly available, right? And every vendor, whether it's HP, Sun, IBM, AIX, Windows, they all have some kind of clustering technology available, which will make it highly available. In addition to the message server, the other single point of failure is the NQ work process. So what makes the central instance a single point of failure are those two work processes, message server and the NQ work process. For NQ, recently SAP has released what's called a replicated NQ. That means you can run two NQ work processes, but only one is active at a time. Second one is just a copy of it. Only when the first one goes down, the second one takes over.
So, I mean, there is no point of high availability of your NQ process, right?
If you use replicated NQ technology, if you do not use it, which a lot of people don't use it, then they put message server and NQ together on the same HA cluster, so that when something happens, both of them fail over.
What's the use of this NQ replication? What exactly is there in this process?
Yeah, in the NQ work process, as we'll read in a little bit, NQ is SAP's locking mechanism. So it is the lock handler. And as with any lock handler, you only want to have one active at a time. Only then can you guarantee, right, that if I am saying that you have a lock on this, till I say that you do not have a lock, nobody else should give you access to the same record. Why? If they do, it will lead to eventually database inconsistency, right? Because what we will read going forward is that SAP does not rely at the database level locking concepts. It relies on application level, business object level locking concepts. So if I say a sales order number 1001 is locked, right, at the SAP level, I don't need to worry about what's happening at the 10,000 tables, across which the sales order exists. because I've locked it at the business object level. And that's what SAP cares more about. And since it locks at the application level, the application is database agnostic. The same application can run on Oracle, it can run on SQL Server, it can run on DB2, it can run on UDB, right? Is because it is doing most of the stuff at the application level and using very few of the database capabilities, and only those capabilities which are typically common across all the database vendors. Right? It's not going to use Oracle triggers for say, it's not going to do any PL SQL stuff. It's not going to use something specific in SQL Server, because if it does, portability is no longer there, right? Coming back to our PDF file, we looked at the message server, we looked at the dispatcher, we looked at IC-MAN, we looked at the underlying work processes of different kinds, one of them being the NQ. Now we are going to shift focus onto the Java side.
Where is the gateway work process?
Right. Yeah. So this diagram, that's a good question. This diagram does not show the gateway work process, even though SAP has a gateway work process. And in fact, if we go here and scroll up a little bit, the gateway work process is right here, GWRD. Right, this is the gateway work process. Again, it was started by 28088, right? So right here, 28088. But what the gateway work process does is it helps communication between SAP and a non-SAP or another SAP system, right? So it is the gateway from that SAP system to the world outside, right? So all RFC traffic which emanates from that SAP system to the world outside, whether it's another SAP system or a non-SAP system, is going through that gateway work process, right? And you will see soon we will go through and list out, or maybe now is the right time to do it. We have in our content here.